And he did it by going to college campuses, which are not normally hospitable to conservatives, and offering his opponents a microphone to have what we always say.
In support of what? In support of what?
Civil discourse.
Not only that, but support of the First Amendment.
She's a Marxist, communist, fascist, socialist. She's not actually a socialist. She's gone past that. Somebody's got to explain this woman. This is a radical left Marxist, communist, fascist.
Right-wing provocateur Scott Jennings appeared on Abby Phillip's CNN show as part of a panel to discuss the unfolding Charlie Kirk controversy. Unsurprisingly, Jennings, known for his insincerity on the conservative side, delivered a barrage of absurd statements. We're going to review clips from this panel discussion featuring Scott Jennings and others on Abby Phillip's program. I'll also provide my insights on the matter. Let's dive into it together.
Who killed Charlie? Left-wing radicals, and they will be held accountable. So will anyone in this country who commits a violent crime against anyone.
Let me play more about what the prosecutors said. The Utah County attorney said about what was going on in Robinson's family, which from our reporting, they are registered Republicans, pretty conservative. Listen to what he said.
Robinson's mother explained that over the last year or so, Robinson had become more political and had started to lean more to the left. This resulted in several discussions with family members, but especially between Robinson and his father, who have very different political views. Robinson: since Trump got into office, my dad has been pretty diehard MAGA.
Until the conflict started right in the House, it seemed.
But you know what, I gotta tell you, there's so much more that needs to be said. You read a couple of excerpts from some of his texts. One of his texts said, when asked, how long have you been thinking about this? A week and a half. It wasn't, I've been thinking about this for the last year and a half. He said a week and a half. If we're going to believe what he said in other places in his text, why not believe that?
What does that say to you?
What it says to me is that I think there are people who are trying to pigeonhole this as a leftist thing and a right thing. And what we're really talking about, hear me because I'm going to throw you when I say this. We're talking about a love-torn child, a kid. This is probably his first real relationship, and somebody was disparaging the person that he loved. He sat on that building for 30 minutes before he took the shot. Why did he wait until the first word trans came up? Then he took the shot.
You think he heard it? He could hear it?
I think he could hear it. I think he also, I don't believe he was motivated politically. I think this was motivated emotionally. I think this was a emotionally stunted person who literally, when I say it this way, just hear me, tried to defend his significant other, not trying to defend some ideology.
Although I do think there's clearly an ideological difference. So that's why I played about what they said about the family. I mean, the ideological difference that he was reacting to wasn't just Charlie Kirk. It was also maybe his dad. I mean, his father was, according to him, MAGA. So that conflict was there, clearly.
But this is a young man who's dating a person in transition. And I'm a conservative father, and I question, let's say, my daughter brought home the first guy that she brought home. I questioned the guy that he brought home. She brought home. Was the dad questioning him politically? Is this a political motivation? Or was this a psychological kind of thing?
I guess I don't know that we'll ever get into fully the minds of what happened here, but it is really horrible that Charlie Kirk was murdered by this person.
Absolutely.
Like, full stop, end of sentence. Horrifying. And whether there are plenty of people who have conflicts with their parents who don't murder people. And, you know, I just think we should all just acknowledge that it was a horrifying, terrible thing. And he deserves punishment for what he did because he took the life of a person. And, you know, I just think it's a little complicated to look back and, you know, say he has a conflict with his father. Lots of these things happen and they don't result in just the end of a life of a father who had children.
Guys, the evidence here is overwhelming. He said, Charlie Kirk, I can't stand this hate anymore. I'm going to take him out. The testimony from him and the statements of his family, he had become more left-wing. He etched the statements that are made by the left about Republicans and conservatives and Charlie Kirk fascist on the bullet casings.
He made a joke about it in his last text.
Well, it doesn't sound like a joke to me because someone's dead and about to be buried.
Well,
So it doesn't sound like a
Those are
joke
two
to me.
things. Those are two
So I'm just telling you, there was an effort all weekend long on the left to try to make this guy sound like he was a conservative. That failed. That was passed around all over the weekend. That has now failed. The evidence has now come out. He was motivated by hate. He was motivated by left-wing radicalism. He got mixed up with some trans ideology in his life. We'll learn more about that, I'm sure, when more evidence and testimony comes out. We are looking around the edges of this for something other than what's staring us in the face. Left-wing radicalism got this kid. He went up to a roof and he murdered our friend, and that's what happened.
Let me just say, I don't think that anybody is disputing. I mean, I'm certainly not disputing. It's written there that he had. Montel, I think it's clearly political. You can't take politics out of it. But I think the question is, when you take that and then you extrapolate from that and you say, as Pam Bondi said, left-wing radicals killed Charlie Kirk. Yeah. And then she says they will be held accountable. Doesn't she have to actually produce evidence that there were other co-conspirators, that there was something organized, rather than, first of all, saying that this is representative of all of the left wing, which it is not, and then suggesting that there's going to be DOJ action against unsaid individuals?
Well, I think it's representative of a large part of the left. And I say that because look at the reaction we have seen from the left. They are cheering. They are celebrating his death. You have outlets saying Charlie Kirk shouldn't have died, but he said some pretty hateful things, as if they're on some moral high ground to say that.
But I wonder, have you seen any evidence of any prominent mainstream Democrats doing what you just described?
There's a Democratic state senator in
celebrating Charlie Kirk's death. Did anybody actually celebrating?
You can't think of the name?
I saw it on Twitter yesterday.
Okay, I know what you're talking about. Hold on. I know what you're talking about because I've seen it too.
Absolutely. Numerous individuals are claiming that Charlie Kirk's passing shouldn't have happened, yet he made some horrific statements. The reality is that Charlie Kirk is far from the saint that right-wing advocates, including people like Scott Jennings and the wider MAGA crowd, are portraying him as. He openly suggested that Joe Biden deserves imprisonment or even execution for his alleged national offenses. I've reiterated this point repeatedly in other videos. Charlie Kirk was no war hero. He wasn't someone who performed life-saving acts. He was merely a controversial podcaster who built a fortune on provoking discussions. While he certainly didn't merit death, he also doesn't warrant being idealized or elevated to a deity status. They're even considering erecting a statue in his honor now. So it's quite deceptive when these right-wing and MAGA supporters, including folks like Scott Jennings, pretend that the offensive rhetoric solely comes from the left. At the beginning of my video, I showcased a short snippet, but now I want to present a full compilation of remarks made by Donald Trump.
Between these far-left fascists, led by Harris and her group, we have a fascist person running who's incompetent. She's a Marxist, communist, fascist, socialist. She's not actually a socialist. She's gone past that. Somebody's got to explain this woman. There's a radical left Marxist, communist, fascist.
Here's Scott Jennings, the leading figurehead. This is the God King of MAGA and the Republican Party, and I believe he's the most damaging force we've witnessed in today's politics. He constantly keeps tensions high. We've never encountered such a polarizing individual. For even half a minute, he can't act presidential to try and unify the nation. Instead, his focus is always on creating rifts and pulling people apart. Then there's that footage of Pam Bondi claiming, anyone who engages in violence will be imprisoned. They'll face arrest. Yet Donald Trump granted pardons to those involved in the violent January 6th insurrection. Pardoned them. So the notion that Republicans, MAGA, and the right wing disapprove of violence is ridiculous. They fully endorse it as long as it's their side starting the chaos.
Did not. In fact, he started that tweet saying that Charlie Kirk should not have been killed. So do you have any evidence of mainstream Democrats celebrating Charlie Kirk's murder?
It does not need to be a mainstream top dog Democrat when the majority of the comments online from the left have been celebratory or cheering on political murder.
How do you know it's a majority?
500,000 likes on a tweet is a lot of people. That is not a fringe or outskirt.
There's like 7 billion people on social media today.
Yeah.
Half a million people.
And about half
a lot of people.
About half the people on social media, by the way, are not even real people. So I do think we have to kind of, the internet is not real life.
Can I ask, though, everybody here acknowledges that there have been thousands upon thousands of people ordinary people who have taken to social media to celebrate this, yes or no?
I don't know about that.
You know,
I don't know.
I have
high school friends who are.
Scott, hold on a second. Hold on. I just think we should just, we got to be factual about this, right?
Yeah.
I don't think you know the scope. I don't know the scope. But I do think that we have to distinguish between random people in the world and something that is a dominant issue.
Because the person who shot Charlie Kirk was a random person in the world, was he not?
Well, here's the thing.
That's the danger. You dismiss the random people of the world. They have access to weapons
assassinations
and
in
hateful
this
motivations.
country. There have been political assassinations in this country before, Scott. Wouldn't you agree? And they're all reprehensible. And in this country, do you believe that in those political assassinations in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, assassination attempts, that there were no Americans who cheered that on? I think the question is whether or not it happens. The question is whether or not we need to place that at the very center of our political world right now and categorize half the people in the country according to those random people that we now just happen to see because of the internet.
If I can, Pam Bondi needs to be a little more careful with what she says. And this is not her first time misspeaking, overspeaking as the Attorney General of the United States. But let's focus on the county prosecutor in Utah. He has been an absolutely straight arrow on this case. He has played this case straight down the middle. He is not a political ideologue. And when he stands up behind the podium and says there's a political motive, I credit that. And that's relevant, by the way. He's not trying to score political points because he wants to be able to explain to the jury why. So I give that a lot of credit. I think that prosecutor has earned, as well as the governor of Utah, a lot of credibility for himself.
I think it is abundantly clear that this person had a political motive, and that is a terrible tragedy. And I think what, most Americans are wondering is why we have politicians running to the TVs trying to score points on who did what and when. This is a terrible tragedy. I'm willing to say it was a terrible tragedy. I think it's horrific that someone did not like the politics of Charlie Kirk and decided to murder him.
Let me
End
play
of story.
To your point about everybody having a come to Jesus moment on this. Let me play Senator Tom Tillis, a Republican, who responding to just the rhetoric that's been flying around this past week. Listen.
There is clearly a problem with some of the voices of the left, and I'm not necessarily saying any members of Congress, that need to tamp it down. Having said that, within 24 hours of Mr. Kirk's shooting, we had the guy that does the podcast for the War Room and another guy who's denied the Sandy Hook shootings say we're at war. I'm just saying that there are people out here on our side of the aisle that still need to look in the mirror.
I think what he's asking is, are we ramping this up or are we trying to turn it down?
I think it's easy for people who are not a conservative, and I know not everybody at this table is a conservative, but Charlie Kirk was murdered because he talked about God, family, country. Those are views that people like Scott and I hold dearly. If Charlie Kirk...
Nobody really knows why Charlie Kirk was killed. The shooter didn't declare, I targeted Charlie Kirk for the sake of God, country, or family. No such rationale has been given. They're just jumping to conclusions, you see. Brianna Lyman mentions that a tweet received 500,000 likes. That's typical MAGA behavior. They'll point to some random individual and claim, this is what the left stands for, as if the entire left is a unified front. It's utterly misleading. They're quick to point fingers at a random social media user while conveniently ignoring comments from Donald Trump or key Republican figures. For instance, Donald Trump mocked the assault on Paul Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi's husband, with a hammer. Donald Trump Jr. even joked about it, sharing an image of underwear and a hammer, calling it his Halloween costume. There's a big difference between statements from the president or leading Republicans and those from an average person online. Yet Scott Jennings argues, well, this shooter was just a random person portraying the shooter as a stand-in for the whole left. It's complete nonsense.
Private citizen can be targeted for those views. It makes us all feel like we have a target on our back. So it's easy for people who have constant security, who are in high places and don't think they're ever going to be targeted, to speak like this. But to the average conservative like myself, this is a scary time because one of our own was taken out. And I think what people have to realize about left-wing violence is it's not some made-up fantasy. There are 3 court cases going on today for assassinations. Luigi Mangione, Ryan Ruth, and Tyler Robinson. What do all 3 have in common?
I mean, there are lots of political trials for violence.
They're all left-wing.
Yes, but there's also, obviously, we went through, I actually think this whole debate of there's right wing, there's left wing. We should all say, I don't know why it's so complicated to say political violence of any kind is wrong.
Of course.
But we have obviously had massive levels of political violence on the right. There's actually a Department of Justice actually suppressed an article about it.
Yeah, there's a DOJ deleted a study showing that domestic terrorists are most often right wing. And here's what that study said. Since 1990, far-right extremists have committed far more ideologically motivated homicides than far-left or radical Islamist extremists, including 227 events that took more than 520 lives. In the same period, far-left extremists committed 42 ideologically motivated attacks that took 78 lives. Now, what you're saying about those three cases is important and relevant, that those things happened, but I think we need to not confuse the most recent for the most common. And essentially, and also, by the way, the most prominent for the most common, because there's a lot of violence happening that doesn't hit the headlines. And so are we, it feels like there's a desire, obviously, on the right, because this is so painful in this moment, obviously, for them, and rightfully so, to address this part of it, and we should. But I don't think we should lose the forest for the trees here. There's a lot going on in this country, and we don't always talk about it on this show, but it's still happening, and it's being tracked by the federal government, or at least it was until yesterday.
Can we, for 1 second, understand that as we continue, Scott just got all angry, got real mad. Face it, it's gotta be this, it's gotta be this, it's gotta be this. Why can't we have a discussion about how long is it going to take for us to figure out a way to come back together?
Just to be clear, I am angry.
Can we just let him finish
I
his
am
thought,
angry.
Scott? I'll let you
because
talk.
I knew it.
Scott,
I'll
let you talk in just a second. Go ahead.
Could we spend as much time figuring out how we bridge this and come back together again? You know, I used to have a note on my producer's desk when I did my show that was said, we don't belabor what happens, we try to figure out why it happens and come up with solutions. Right now, all we're doing is belaboring what happened over and over and over and over again. We're not going to sit down and try to figure out how do we stop it. If we want to
got to go after left-wing terrorists. That's actually exactly the conversation we're having, is we're acknowledging there's a problem.
So anybody who disagrees with you is a left-wing terrorist?
Absolutely not, but if they target a conservative and murder...
And of course, Montel Williams is talking about trying to bridge the gap here. And what does the right wing, what do the MAGA people say? Well, the problem is the left. And never any acknowledgement that there could be any problem at all on the right. Everybody on the right, all of MAGA, they're saints. They just want to get along and have a better country. They don't do anything violent. And Abby Phillip shows that graphic of violence since 1990, political violence. During that time, we had Timothy McVeigh with Oklahoma City bombing. We had the January 6th insurrectionists, two events much bigger than any of this left-wing violence that they're talking about. And Breonna Lyman talks about Luigi Mangione and now this shooter with Charlie Kirk. And we don't know exactly the motivations of the shooter with Charlie Kirk, but it seems to be something very different than what Luigi Mangione's motivation was.
Murder him in brutal fashion. He's probably a left-wing terrorist.
Let me answer your question.
Yes, that person is a murderer.
You said,
we can all acknowledge that.
You said I am angry, and I am channeling the emotions of millions of conservatives who are angry. They knew Charlie. They loved Charlie. They viewed Charlie as a mainstream conservative Republican voice who talked about issues that millions of Americans believe. He also talked about his faith. And he did it by going to college campuses, which are not normally hospitable to conservatives, and offering his opponents a microphone to have what we always say.
In support of what? In support of what?
Civil discourse.
Not only that, but support of the First Amendment.
And
he
guess what?
made sure that people had an opportunity to stand in a room and talk.
He was murdered trying to do what we always say. Why don't we talk to each other? So yes, it's not even been a week. So you're going to have to give us a little grace on being angry about somebody who did what you always say that we should do. Let's talk.
We didn't
and
get
he
much
got
grace
killed.
over.
And he got
more
killed.
than a week's grace over two Michigan elected officials who were murdered. Did we give? Was it 3 weeks before we decided to say that there was something wrong with Speaker Pelosi's husband being hit in the head with a hammer?
By a homeless drug addict? I mean, it was terrible that happened.
Donald Trump Jr., and plenty of other right-wing personalities made a lot of jokes about Nancy Pelosi's husband nearly getting beaten badly. However, Scott Jennings will never own up to this because he's dishonest. He's just there on Abby Phillip's show to peddle falsehoods and misinformation. The narrative goes that every problem in the world stems from the left, while all good things come from MAGA and the right, who are portrayed as virtuous saints. Meanwhile, the entire left is painted as pure evil. This is the story that MAGA followers like Scott Jennings shamelessly broadcast online and on television each day. Charlie Kirk did the same daily, and he was friends with Scott Jennings. Now, I completely understand that Jennings has every right to be sad about losing a friend and to grieve that loss. I'm not going to deny him that. But when he discusses conservative outrage, it's worth noting that this anger didn't suddenly appear. It's been simmering for years and years, fueled by Donald Trump. Figures on the right, like Charlie Kirk and back in the day Rush Limbaugh, have constantly agitated the MAGA crowd. Donald Trump excels at this, keeping his supporters in a state of perpetual anger. The message is always about threats. Antifa is out to get you. Immigrants are a danger. These people are ruining you. Others are cheating you. It's never about looking for the good in the country or recognizing that there are decent folks on all sides. Instead, it's always that the left is monstrous, calling them animals, pests, fascists, even communists. So I'm tired of Scott Jennings and MAGA blaming everything on the left. They claim it's all leftist violence, while in reality, people like Montel Williams and Abby Phillip try to point out that there's enough blame to go around on both sides, even up to the president. I'd love to know where you stand on this. Do you side with Scott Jennings' perspective, or do you resonate more with Montel Williams and Abby Phillip's take? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe.